Well, hey, good afternoon, Rocky Beyond the Walls. This is Pastor AJ, and we are halfway through our Proverbs series. We've tackled topics on leadership, parenting. This last weekend, Pastor Jess brought us to this topic of laziness that we find in the Book of Proverbs. I'll be preaching on friendship this coming weekend. We've got the tongue coming up, and this whole idea of contentment. What does it mean to be a content Christian? And so I hope that it's been a beneficial series for you. I've enjoyed it. I know Pastor Jess has enjoyed it as well. Part of our values here at Rocky Mountain Church is we want to bring God's Word accurately into the framework of our lives. We don't want to bring our own framework to the text. We want the text to speak clearly and definitively about all these areas. And ultimately, we want to look to Christ to raise our affections in all things for all people. That's why we exist as Christians. And my hope over the next few years is to be able to cultivate a culture at Rocky Mountain Church that speaks to just that, raising our affections for Christ in all things for all people. And that's why throughout the calendar year, we're going to look at passages in God's Word that speak to very specific things, very pointed things in the world we live in. So, all that to say, hey, let's jump into this idea of laziness. And I think Pastor Jess did a great job of breaking down just some realities as we look at the book of Proverbs in relation to laziness. And I want to share those with you. And it's surrounding what laziness can and will do if you embrace it in your life. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what I call the gauges. So laziness will derail God's purposes for your life. Pastor Jess talked about that. And he and I would both agree that it's not derailing God's sovereignty in your life, but there are blessings we miss out on because of our laziness, because of our just general unwillingness to own things, to take responsibility in different areas of our lives, and we miss those things. And so that's really important for us to understand. Laziness, if prolonged, right, it's going to ensure poverty in our lives to some level. And that's not just financial, but it's emotional, it's physical, mental. We're going to talk about that here in a bit. Laziness will move you towards really bankruptcy in all areas of your life. So we want to be really, really careful of that. It's, see in the Proverbs, they use agriculture a lot in the Bible to share pictures of what the world actually looks like, spiritual realities. So the man that wakes up and he has been in slumber, even though he should have been planting, casting seeds, finds his field empty. There's no food, nothing in the storehouses, nothing he or she can live off of. So laziness can rot us, deprive us of, and really moves us towards ensuring poverty in our lives. Laziness will squander provisions for your life. Laziness will squander provisions for your life. It's similar to the last statement. It's just a matter of time. It's a trajectory in which if we live this way, squandering in different areas, like I said, whether it's emotional, spiritual, mental, physical, those things get jeopardized. They get stripped out. They get abandoned, left to the wayside. When you think about squandering something, it means you've had it, it's been given to you, presented to you, and you underutilize it. It goes to waste. It's like the proverb where the man, he kills the animal. All right, he's done part A, but he's unwilling to field dress it. So what happens to the meat? Well, it goes gamey. It gets rotted. I don't know if you've ever had, it's not the privilege, but I remember this story. My dad was passionate about deer hunting, as I am, and he started this program in the state of Wisconsin where it was a deer donation program. So hunters could shoot deer and donate them to all sorts of food pantries, and the DNR, for every license sold, would donate money to the processors so that that meat could be processed. Unfortunately, not a lot of hunters know how to process the animal well, so they would drop off these deer. Well, they were already disgusting. No one's going to eat that. Or they might have found a roadkill on the side of the road. I don't know if you've seen a roadkill before of a deer or an elk, but they're basically just blown up because of all of the nasty stuff going on in there. You don't want to eat that. So this guy in Proverbs he's killed an animal, but he's unwilling, he's lazy, he squanders all of the good meat that could have been provisional, that could have provided. It's let to waste. Laziness will miss positions for your life. I think this can be incorporated into our vocations. It can be incorporated into our relationships. When we're lazy, we miss opportunities. We miss opportunities for God to use the gifts that He's given us, not to boast in them, not to boast in your acumen or your abilities, but to understand that the things you have been given can provide you with more influence. You remember when we talked about leadership? The reality is all of you carry influence. And when we're lazy, all right, we can squander the positions that God has given us, positions of leadership, influence. Whether it's in your home or in your business or in your community, it's important for us to understand. Laziness will irritate people in your life. I don't know if you have kids at home, but socks are laying around, shoes are laying around, coats are laying around. I've been guilty of this as a dad, where I'm not really good at making my side of the bed, and I need to be, but I'm lazy sometimes. And so this irritates, right? It irritates people because people have different standards. People have different mentalities as they approach how life should be ordered and all of these things. And if we're not in good communication about those standards, conflict arises. So laziness can sometimes irritate people in your life. And at times we have to humble ourselves, even though we really don't want to make our side of the bed, or we're super tired, or we might even forget about it. And we just do it anyways. And I'm speaking to myself. I'm preaching to the choir here. So a question arises as we look at this. In what areas might you be displaying a lazy perspective? And that's where I want to take you to this idea of personal gauges. All right, you are a human being created in the image of God, and therefore you are a holistic person. And what I mean by that is you're not just spiritual. You're not just physical. You have a mental part. You have a relational part. You have an innate need for relationships. There's a financial aspect to your life, right? All of these different things we can become lazy in. And if you think about it, you think about a gas gauge, right? And you've got E, and you've got full. All of these gauges can run on fumes if we're not careful. And oftentimes, let's say relationally, all right, I'm struggling relationally, I'm being lazy relationally. That's meaning that I'm not, me personally, I'm not pursuing the people in my life that I should be. I'm not building the relationships. I'm not making the phone calls. I'm not the one reaching out. And we need to be on the offensive, even though we might be wired as a hermit. We need to be on the offensive to create those relationships. Physically, now no one can lose 10 pounds for me. I have to do it. If I've got high cholesterol, or I'm struggling with diabetes, or I'm struggling with eating habits and sleeping habits, I have to own that and take responsibility for those things, right? No one else can do them. So I can't be lazy there. Financially, God has given us, you and I, great gifts. Some small, some abundantly, but they're gifts nonetheless. How do we use them faithfully? And then I think mentally is something that we underplay quite a bit as Christians. So sometimes we over-spiritualize things and we disconnect the God-given, God-created brain we have in certain areas. Some of you might deal with seasonal depression. Some of you might deal with suicidal thoughts. Some of you might struggle with identity issues and insecurities. So when that gauge, that mental gauge is on E, it can be a dangerous place for you to go. So it's important for us to look at these gauges and say, where am I full? Where am I on empty or close to empty? Where am I running on fumes? And maybe we need to think about, am I being lazy in those areas? Should I take more ownership and more responsibility? And so just some things to share with you as you go about your week. Thanks for jumping into Beyond the Walls here today. God bless you.